Welcome to this week's edition of SKNS Week in Review. In this program, we focus on the top stories for the past week. I am your presenter, Raheem Berry. Highlights for the week of January 14th to January 20th includes St. Kitts and Nevis passport remains one of the strongest in the world with access to 161 countries visa-free. St. Kitts and Nevis enjoys excellent recovery rates from the fourth wave of COVID-19. Holders of the St. Kitts and Nevis passport can access 161 countries without a visa, making the travel document one of the strongest in the Caribbean and the world. Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Mac Brantley, said that this achievement is no small feat, given that the Twin Island Federation is the smallest independent nation in the Western Hemisphere.
It shows tremendous confidence by governments globally about St. Kitts and Nevis. And it has allowed us to access countries in a very meaningful and significant way. Now, many people say, oh, I don't want to go to Africa. Or I don't want to go to, Uzbekistan. And they say, why are you pursuing? But each visa waiver, I think, demonstrates the confidence that these countries have in us. And each one increases the strength and the viability of the St. Kitts and Nevis passport. And so we are due, I'm told, to sign with Zimbabwe. We're due, I'm told, to sign with Uganda and one other country, I can't remember now. But all of those are likely to happen in the first quarter of this year. And that will catapult us to about 165 or so countries that we can access visa-free.
The additional visa waiver agreements will strengthen the international recognition of St. Kitts and Nevis' passport and conceivably make it a most acceptable travel passport from the Caribbean. Health authorities in St. Kitts and Nevis continue to expertly manage the fourth wave of the COVID-19 virus, which is currently being marked by declining numbers of new infections and rising recovery rates. At the National Emergency Operations Center COVID-19 briefing on Wednesday, January 19, 2022, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Hazel Laws said that the Federation continues to enjoy an excellent recovery rate, and so an increasing number of our positive cases have recovered.
Round about the 13th of January, you realize that the number of recoveries seem to be exceeding the number of newly diagnosed cases daily. And so that's a good thing, and we hope to continue in like manner.
The fourth wave began on December 24th, 2021. Statistics from the Ministry of Health indicate that 2,243 new cases developed between then and January 18, 2022. There have been 1,151 recoveries recorded over that same period. COVID-19 related deaths remain steady at 28 persons. Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Mac Brantley, in calling on citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, particularly young people with a desire to pursue tertiary academic studies, to make a full use of the scholarship opportunities that the government has secured from diplomatic allies.
So many of us go and borrow large sums of money and put our families to tremendous debt and expense to get an education that, if you looked carefully, might be available somewhere for free. And, there's, in my view now, no magic about where you go to get your degree. A degree is really just a ticket into the park. What you do with it is ultimately what matters. And so whether you got your degree in Morocco or in Taiwan or in New York, it really doesn't matter at this stage. It really matters what you do with it, what you do with the education that you've got. And that, I think, is what is most important.
The Foreign Affairs Minister encouraged persons to broaden their horizons and look beyond the offerings of the United States to enjoy the world of opportunities that other countries have to offer. The The government of St. Kitts and Nevis exhausted every possible channel to ensure that citizens and residents alike have access to COVID-19 vaccines, given the ongoing global pandemic and vaccine shortages. During the January 19, 2022 NEOC COVID-19 press briefing, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Hazel Laws responded to questions about the availability of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine in the Federation, since some persons would have received their first dose but are unable to have their second.
At present, the Ministry of Health is trying to get our hands on the next batch of AstraZeneca Oxford vaccines, but in the meantime, you can mix and match. So in other words, if you have received the first dose of the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine and you are willing to get your second dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, feel free to go back to the health center and you can get the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine as your second dose. And so mixing and matching is allowed and approved in the Federation.
As of January 19, 2022, 43,928 doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered across the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, attributing to 81.9% coverage rate for the first dose and 76.3% coverage rate for the second dose amongst adult population of the Federation. The Ministry of Health has undertaken a mass education and awareness campaign in an effort to inform members of the general public about everything COVID-19 related, noting the importance of credible information given the vast amounts of misinformation available. During the January 19, 2022 NEOC press briefing, Medical Chief of Staff at the Joseph N. France General Hospital, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, clarified an issue related to the effectiveness of the PCR test as a tool for testing persons for COVID-19.
The PCR test is highly sensitive, which means that if you have the coronavirus multiplying in your nostrils and the sample is taken, it will pick it up even if you have a very low viral threshold. It is also highly specific, which means that once you're told you have COVID-19, you do have COVID-19 based on a positive test. However, I've said before that a positive test is as good as the time when it was taken. And so you could come now, have a test, and test negative, and you're truly negative. And you can leave this room and go outside and pick up the virus and come down with symptoms sometime later on. And so just because you tested negative doesn't necessarily mean that you have to drop your guard. Also, yes, in this wave where we know that the predominant virus responsible for the flu-like symptoms would be the coronavirus, someone can still have the flu, and so you could have flu-like symptoms, you have a PCR test, it is negative, and it could be that you had a flu-like illness, but the precautions are basically the same.
During the carnival season and the beginning of the new year, hundreds of persons across the Federation complained about suffering flu-like symptoms. The Ministry of Health has since sent samples for testing and have confirmed the presence of the Omicron variant as a source of the fourth wave of COVID-19 infections in the Federation. Assistant Comptroller in the St. Kitts and Nevis Customs and Excise Department, Desley Greenaway, highlighted the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic had on the local economy during his appearance on a local radio and television show, Working For You, on January 19.
In 2018, just a comparison, we had imports value to the tune of over $877 million. Now, compared to 2021, we are seeing that drop by over $200 million. We have had value imports up to $647 million, right? Now, in speaking to a representative of one of the supermarkets, we have learned that the freight pre-COVID, the freight on one 20-foot container was average between 4,000 and 6,000 EC dollars. And that 40-foot container to be shipped, the value was between 8,000 and 10,000 EC dollars. Now, during the pandemic, we have seen the freight increase now, where a 20-foot container would cost between 8,000 and 10,000 EC dollars, and a 40-foot container would cost now between 12,000 and 15,000 EC dollars. And of course, you know, that cost would be passed on to the consumers ultimately. I have seen it. I've gone to the supermarkets pre-COVID. I would see, for example, cauliflower, for example, would cost $7. During the pandemic, the price increased to $13.
He added that if the government of St. Kitts and Nevis does not acquire the amount of imports seen in 2018, then the government won't generate as much revenue to fund different projects. And this concludes this week's edition of SKNIS Week in Review. See you next week.